The world was a silent, dark aquarium at 2 a.m. Only the occasional car drifted past like a lone, phosphorescent fish, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. In our suburban cul-de-sac, the stillness was absolute. For me, Lena Croft, that silence was first broken not by a sound but by a sensation. A dull, insistent, grinding buzz. My phone, vibrating against the polished oak of the nightstand with a mechanical urgency that felt entirely out of place in the softness of the night. It pulled me from the edges of a fragile sleep. Beside me, my husband of 7 years, David, breathed in the deep, untroubled rhythms of a man with a clear conscience. Or a very skilled liar. One arm was draped heavily over my waist, a familiar anchor of warmth that usually comforted me. Tonight it felt like a weight pinning me to a life that had suddenly become a lie. I turned my head slowly, my heart beginning a frantic, stumbling rhythm against my ribs. The screen's cold, ghostly blue glow was the only light in the room, illuminating a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to see. A WhatsApp message. The sender's profile picture was a young woman I didn't recognize. Chloe. Her face was a perfect mask of salon-styled beauty, her eyes holding a sly, provocative challenge that seemed to leap from the screen. A knot of pure, undiluted dread tightened in my stomach, a cold fist clenching deep inside me. With a finger that felt numb and alien, I tapped the screen. The heat drained from my body all at once, rushing away from my limbs and leaving me cold and hollow. It was a photo. The background was unmistakably a luxury suite at the Grand Crestwood, a place David had taken me for our anniversary. Now the white sheets were a tangled mess. A man's dress shirt and a little black dress were discarded on the plush carpet like fallen leaves. And in the center of it all was David. My David. Bare-chested, asleep, his handsome face softened in the dim lamplight, looking more peaceful than he had in months. And curled against his chest like she belonged there was the girl from the profile picture, Chloe. She was holding up her phone, flashing a triumphant V for victory at the camera, a look of pure, unabashed ownership on her face. In the lower right corner, a digital timestamp burned itself into my memory. 10:05 p.m. last night. My breath hitched, catching in my throat like a shard of glass. At 10:07 p.m. my phone had rung. David's voice had been textured with a perfect mix of weariness and apology. "Baby, I'm so sorry. There's a total crisis with the Henderson account. Jensen is breathing down my neck. I'm going to be at the office all night. Don't wait up." I had told him I loved him. I had told him to please try and get some rest. I had believed him. His office was a 5-star hotel suite. His urgent crisis was in another woman's bed. A profound coldness settled over me then, a deep, penetrating chill that started in the soles of my feet and crept upward, freezing my blood, numbing every nerve ending. The sharp, stabbing pain of betrayal hadn't hit yet. That would come later. For now I was just empty. I felt disembodied, as if I were floating near the ceiling, watching this strange woman in this familiar bed discover that the 7 years of her life were a carefully constructed fiction. I didn't wake him. I didn't scream or cry. I so carefully lifted his heavy arm from my waist and slipped out from under the duvet. The plush carpet felt alien under my bare feet. I walked into the study, the cold hardwood floor sending a jolting shock through me that sharpened my focus. I turned on the computer, the blue light of the monitor washing over my face, no doubt pale and bloodless. I found her full name with terrifying ease, Chloe Miller, and with a few more clicks I found where she worked, a mid-sized tech firm called NextGen Innovations. My fingers, now steady and cold, flew across the keyboard. I found the company's website and navigated to the Contact Us page. There it was, a dedicated email address for HR and ethical violations. I attached the damning photo. I wrote a subject line that was a masterpiece of cold accusation. Real name report regarding employee Chloe Miller's serious misconduct. My message was clinical, factual, and utterly brutal. I included her full name, her department, and even deduced her employee number from a partially blurred ID badge visible in another photo on her profile. My finger hovered over the send button for only a heartbeat. Then I pressed it. The email vanished into the ether with a soft whoosh. I closed the laptop, the screen going black and reflecting my hollow-eyed expression for a moment. I walked back to the bedroom and slid under the covers. David stirred in his sleep, rolled over and pulled me close, mumbling my name into my hair. I lay there rigid and cold in the arms of the man who had just atomized my world, and I waited for the dawn. I wasn't woken by my alarm, but by the familiar dip of the mattress as David got up. I kept my eyes closed, feigning sleep, every sense hyper-aware. I felt him lean over me, his lips brushing my forehead in a gesture that now felt like a brand of hypocrisy. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured, his voice still husky with sleep. A week ago that would have melted me. Now it felt like a slick, slimy thing crawling across my skin. I forced myself to remain perfectly still, to not recoil. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked, stretching with a yawn. "Fine," I said, my voice a little rough from disuse. I sat up and let my gaze drift, as if by accident, to his phone on the nightstand. It lit up at that precise moment, the screen flooding with notifications. Dozens of missed calls. All from Chloe. He saw me looking and snatched it up with a speed that was pure, unadulterated panic. A flash of sheer terror crossed his face before he mastered it, smoothing his features into a mask of mild annoyance. "Damn work calls already," he muttered, his voice tighter than before. He shoved the phone deep into the pocket of his robe as if he could hide the evidence. "I'll go grab a shower." Big day. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, I picked up my own phone. I'd put it on silent. The screen was a torrent of notifications, a waterfall of rage and panic. Dozens of calls. Over 100 messages. All from Chloe. I opened them. The vitriol leapt off the screen. "You psychotic bitch. You did this, didn't you? They fired me. I just passed my probation. You've ruined my life. My career is over. He loves me, not you. You're just an old, pathetic hag. I'm going to make you pay for this. Just you wait." I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, no satisfaction. Just a cold, clinical detachment. I took screenshots of every single message, methodically preserving each line of her hysterical confession. Then with a tap I blocked her number and deleted the contact. The sudden silence felt like my first, small victory. When David came out, his hair was wet and his expression was dark, clouded with a preoccupation he couldn't shake. He tried to be casual over breakfast, stirring his coffee a little too vigorously. "Hey, you didn't happen to see any weird messages last night, did you?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. "My phone's been acting up." I looked right at him, my face a perfect, placid mask of innocent confusion. "Weird messages? What do you mean? Like spam?" I took a sip of my orange juice, my hand perfectly steady. He stared at me, his eyes searching mine for a flicker of guilt, a trace of knowledge. He found nothing but bland curiosity. My calm was an impenetrable fortress. "No, nothing," he muttered, looking away, defeated by my normalcy. "Forget I said anything." At breakfast the air was thick with unsaid words. He picked at his food, his eyes constantly darting toward the pocket containing his phone. When it rang he jumped, fumbling to decline the call instantly. "Is he the client? The difficult one from last night. I have to run." He shoveled the last of his eggs into his mouth and practically bolted for the door. "Drive safe," I said, standing to gently straighten his crooked tie. He flinched almost imperceptibly at my touch, a guilty man startled by a simple kindness. The moment the front door clicked shut, the gentle, wifely expression melted from my face. The mask was off. The game was on. I needed an ally. I needed someone with a mind like a steel trap and a heart loyal only to me. I called my best friend Sarah Vance. She was a shark in the courtroom, a divorce attorney who had seen the worst of humanity and had the legal wit to dissect it. "Sarah. Lunch?" "My treat. Somewhere quiet." She knew instantly from my tone. "What's wrong? What did he do?" "David gave me a gift," I said, my voice chillingly even. "I need to return the favor." We met in a secluded booth at a discreet downtown bistro. I slid my phone across the table, the photo of David and Chloe displayed on the screen. Sarah's fork clattered loudly against her plate, drawing a few glances. "Holy hell, Lena," she breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. "You nuked the mistress. Overnight. I'm both impressed and utterly terrified of you right now." I didn't smile. There was no humor in this. She was just the symptom, Sarah. The most recent and the stupidest one. David is the disease. Sarah's lawyer brain immediately kicked into gear, pushing past the initial shock. "So what's the plan? Confront him? Serve him with papers tomorrow?" I shook my head slowly, my gaze fixed on the condensation forming on my water glass. Confrontation is what he expects. It lets him play the victim to spin excuses to gaslight me. It gives him control of the narrative. I'm not going to yell. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to dismantle his life, piece by piece, brick by brick, while he stands there smiling, completely oblivious, thinking he's still the brilliant architect of his perfect life. Sarah looked at me, her expression shifting. The Lena she knew was gentle, the one who cried at animal rescue commercials. This calm, calculating woman sitting across from her was someone new, forged in the fire of a single, searing image. "Lena, you've changed," she said softly, a trace of worry in her voice. "People change," I replied, my voice flat. "David killed the woman I was. The one who's left, she's a survivor. And survivors do what they must." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my icy hand. "Hey. Then we play the long game. Whatever you decide to do, I'm with you. Just promise me you'll be careful." That evening, David came home looking exhausted and deeply preoccupied. He didn't mention Chloe, not a word. Instead, he launched into an elaborate monologue about work stress, about a difficult project, using it as a blanket excuse for his tension and the constant furtive glances at his phone. I played my part to perfection. The concerned, doting wife. I ran him a bath, brought him a cup of his favorite tea, listened to his fabricated problems with a sympathetic ear. He seemed to relax a little, soothed by my performance, but his eyes still darted away, and I saw him typing out quick, frantic replies before deleting them just as fast. The mess with Chloe wasn't over. A young, entitled girl who had just had her future incinerated doesn't simply disappear. She becomes a loose cannon, and David was desperately trying to keep her from rolling over the side of the ship and taking him down with her. He was distracted. He was vulnerable. It was the perfect time to start digging. The archaeology of a failing marriage is a grim business. I started quietly during the hours he slept or was at work. I became a ghost in my own home, a shadow sifting through the remnants of our shared life, gathering weapons for a war he didn't yet know we were fighting. I began with a full inventory. Our joint savings accounts, investment portfolios, property deeds for the house, retirement funds. I photographed every document, every statement, every line item, and encrypted them before uploading everything to a secure cloud drive he knew nothing about. Knowledge was power, and I was arming myself to the teeth. Then, with a sinking heart, I dug into his personal financial records. I accessed the online portals for his credit cards, the passwords saved in his browser. What I found there stole the air from my lungs and replaced it with a leaden weight of disgust. Business trips to Chicago from the previous fall. Large, unexplained charges at a boutique hotel I'd never heard of, followed by a dinner for two at an exclusive restaurant. The name on the reservation wasn't Chloe's. It was another woman's name. A conference in Seattle last winter. More charges. A spa day, a couple's massage. Another name. Danielle. Chloe wasn't the first. She wasn't even the second. She was just the latest. The most brazen. The one arrogant enough to send a trophy shot. The affairs were a pattern, a sustained hobby spanning years. The man was a serial predator in a bespoke suit. But then I saw something else, something that made the affair seem almost trivial. Large, regular cash withdrawals from his account. Substantial transfers, always just under the reporting threshold, to a bank account I didn't recognize. The name attached was a man's. Mr. Evans. A name David had mentioned in passing months ago, a big-time investor he was trying to woo. This was bigger than infidelity. This felt criminal. I needed to test the waters. At a family dinner with his parents, I casually mentioned a story I'd seen on the news. "A friend of a friend's husband," I said, shaking my head with feigned sympathy. "He was caught embezzling from his company. Can you believe it? They took him away in handcuffs right from his office." I was watching David. The glass of red wine in his hand trembled just slightly. A fine, sudden sheen of sweat appeared on his temple. He took a hurried gulp of his drink, his eyes fixed on a point on the wall behind me. "That's terrible," he stammered. "Some people have no shame." His reaction was all the confirmation I needed. He was hiding something massive. That night, after he'd fallen into a nervous, whiskey-assisted sleep, I turned on his personal laptop. It was password protected, but I knew him too well. His vanity and his sentimentality were his greatest weaknesses. The password was our wedding anniversary. The irony was a physical pain in my chest. I used a data recovery program I'd quietly installed weeks before. I restored dozens of deleted files, encrypted contract drafts, a detailed project plan with a code name, Project Phoenix. A series of emails with Mr. Evans that started with business jargon and descended into increasingly suggestive, incriminating language. I spent the rest of the night piecing the fragments together, and slowly, a monstrous scheme emerged. David wasn't just cheating on me. He was cheating his company. He was secretly developing a new project with Evans, and its funding was highly suspicious. Large sums were being funneled from Evans's company through a daisy chain of shell corporations, all leading back to accounts David controlled. It was textbook embezzlement. Corporate fraud. He hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He was playing a dangerous game with the law, and he was losing. I called Sarah first thing in the morning. It's worse than we thought. I laid it all out for her. The affairs, the money transfers, the secret project. She listened in stunned silence, her professional composure cracking. "Lena, this is a criminal case," she finally said, her voice grave. "This goes far beyond divorce. He's playing with fire. You need to get out. No. We take this to the authorities anonymously and you file for divorce immediately." "No," I said, my voice cold and hard as iron. "If I report him now, he goes to jail, yes. But the embezzled money gets seized by the company or the government. As his wife, I could be dragged into the investigation. I might walk away with nothing but scandal. And he'll find a way to twist it, to blame me, to play the victim. No." I took a deep breath. "I want him to walk into the trap he built for me. I want him to hand me the knife himself and show me exactly where to plunge it in." David, believing the Chloe incident was finally fading into the rearview, became sweeter than ever. He was a man overcompensating, trying to paper over his guilt and anxiety with a performance of devoted husbandry. Flowers arrived at the house for no reason. He booked us a table at a Michelin-starred restaurant we could barely afford. He whispered sweet nothings that now sounded like lines from a bad play. I accepted it all with a serene smile, all the while screaming inside. The more he performed, the more my disgust grew. He thought he was soothing a nervous wife. He was actually feeding the resolve of his executioner. Then one night, over an expensive bottle of Cabernet, he made his move. The real move. "Honey, I have this incredible investment opportunity," he said, his eyes shining with a fake excitement that didn't reach them. "It's a sure thing. The returns are insane. But," he sighed, playing the part of the frustrated provider, "I'm a little short on the initial capital." "How much is a little?" I asked, sipping my wine, playing my part of the supportive partner. "About 2 million, he said, as if asking for $20 for lunch. I nearly choked. I set my glass down carefully to hide the tremor in my hand. 2 million? David, that's everything." I know, he said, leaning forward, oozing persuasive charm. "But that's why it's perfect. I was thinking, we could use your parents' old apartment as collateral for a loan? It's just sitting there empty, draining us in taxes. This is for us, for our future. We'll be set for life." My blood ran cold. Not only had he stolen from his company and cheated on me for years, now he wanted to gamble my family's legacy, the last thing that was truly and solely mine, the apartment my parents had left me. He was trying to monetize my grief to fund his corruption. I didn't say no. I let a conflicted, worried look cross my face. "It's my parents' place, Mark. That's their last gift to me. That's a huge risk." He launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar. Promises of villas and world cruises. Vows spoken with his hand over his heart. Talk of babies and secure futures. He thought he was convincing me. He was just reading his own eulogy. I pretended to be slowly, reluctantly swayed. "Wait, maybe," I said, biting my lip. "But I need to feel secure. My parents were so cautious. We have to sign a formal investment agreement. Everything in writing. Where the money goes, the risks, the timelines, all of it. I need it black and white." He agreed instantly, a wave of visible relief washing over him. He thought I was just being a careful, boring, predictable wife. He never once imagined I was dictating the terms of his surrender. Sarah drafted the agreement. It was a legal masterpiece. On the surface, it was a standard, dry joint investment contract between spouses. But buried in the complex legalese were tripwires and traps. It clearly stipulated that the loan funds must be used exclusively for the specified project. The most crucial clause, the one Sarah and I spent hours refining, stated that if the project was ever found to involve any illegal or non-compliant activities, or if it resulted in any financial loss, all legal liabilities and economic damages would be borne solely by David Croft, with no recourse to me or my assets whatsoever. To reassure me into signing, David, in his arrogance, even volunteered to include several terms that were wildly unfavorable to him, like a personal guarantee to cover any losses. In his mind, these clauses would never be triggered. He agreed to them without a second thought. Before we signed, I retrieved the copies I had made of his shadow contract with Evans and the key bank transfer records. I placed them next to the pristine investment agreement we were about to sign, snapped a photo and sent it to Sarah with one word: tonight. We met at Sarah's law firm the next day. The air in the conference room was cool, smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Sarah attended as my legal representative, dressed in a sharp, black, power suit that meant business. She professionally, painstakingly went over every clause in the agreement, her voice a calm, monotone drone. David grew visibly impatient, shifting in his leather chair, checking his phone. But because he was so eager to get his hands on the money, to solve his Chloe problem and fund his scheme, he forced himself to sit through it. He was hearing words but not their meaning. When it was finally time for him to sign, he took the proffered pen and scrawled his name across the line with a bold, confident flourish. The moment the pen left the paper, a relieved, triumphant smile spread across his face. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted everyone. He even had the audacity to wrap his arm around my shoulders and pull me close, whispering in my ear, "Honey, get ready to be a very rich woman." I looked at his deceitful, smiling face so close to mine and I smiled back. It was the hardest performance of my life. Yes, I thought, my inner voice a blade of ice. I'll wait to watch you fall from the top of this building you've built on lies. He was probably already mentally spending the money, figuring out how much to throw at Chloe to make her disappear forever. The moment he stepped out of the law firm, buoyant and arrogant, I pulled out my phone. I had already prepared the email. The anonymous report was addressed to his company's compliance department, the city's economic crime unit, and the IRS. Attached was the entire organized evidence chain. The shadow contract with Evans, the bank records, the money trail. And the final, damning piece of evidence: the investment agreement he had just signed, accepting full and sole responsibility for everything. It was his confession signed in his own hand. I took a deep breath of the cool afternoon air and pressed send. David's game was over. The anonymous report landed in the inboxes of power like a depth charge. The detonation was immediate and brutal. His company was the first to react. Early the next morning, I heard through the gossip vine that upper management was in a state of apoplectic fury. The compliance and legal departments formed a special investigation team that descended on his office like avenging angels, seizing his computer, his files, his everything. David's phone began to ring incessantly. At first he tried to remain calm, shutting himself in his home study, his voice a low, controlled murmur. "It's a misunderstanding, a clerical error. I can explain." But as the hours wore on, his voice grew louder, tighter, fraying at the edges. His emotions were spiraling out of control. I stood outside the door, listening to the symphony of his downfall. "This is slander. Someone is framing me." "Evidence? What evidence? You can't take an anonymous email seriously. I demand to see the board. I'll explain it to them face to face." When he finally emerged, he was a ghost of himself. His face was pale and waxy, his eyes wide with animalistic fear, like a rabbit caught in the blinding glare of headlights. He saw me standing there and lunged forward as if I were his last lifeline, clutching my hands in his cold, sweaty ones. "Lena, the company, they've gone crazy. Someone's after me. You believe me, right? You know I'm innocent." His voice was a desperate plea. I gently slipped my hands from his grasp, my skin crawling at his touch. I poured him a glass of water, my movements slow and calm. "Don't rush. Take a breath. Tell me slowly what happened." My calmness seemed to steady him for a moment, a leaf finding a temporary respite from the storm. He didn't dare tell me the truth. He muttered instead about corporate politics, about jealous rivals, about being made a scapegoat. I didn't press him. I just listened, my eyes filled with a well-practiced look of trust and concern. At that moment his phone rang again. The screen lit up. Chloe. He glanced at it, a flash of pure irritation and panic crossing his face before he declined the call. But the caller was relentless, dialing again and again. Finally, with a growl of frustration, he answered and stepped out onto the balcony, his voice a low, sharp hiss I could barely hear through the glass. Will you stop calling me? I'm up to my neck in it here. I don't have time for your drama. I didn't need to hear her side. I could imagine it. The shrill accusations. The demands for the money he'd promised her. The man who had been her big strong man and her teddy bear was now tearing into her and she into him. The two people who had conspired to break me were now tearing each other apart. It was a beautiful, vicious melody. 3 days later, the internal investigation was complete. The evidence was too ironclad, too complete. David was formally terminated for gross misconduct, embezzlement, and fraud. The company issued a press release. The news spread through the business community like wildfire. The once respected Golden Boy executive was now a public pariah, a laughingstock. That afternoon, after being escorted from the building, he called me countless times. I didn't answer. Then the texts started coming from various unknown numbers. Lena, it's you, isn't it? Has to be you. You poisonous witch pulling strings behind my back. What did I ever do to you to deserve this? Please, I'm begging you. Meet me. We can talk. For the sake of our 7 years. I'll kill you for this. Threats, curses, pleas. I read them all without a flicker of emotion. 7 years. When he was in bed with Chloe, did he think of those 7 years? When he was plotting to steal my inheritance, did he think of those 7 years? Now that he'd lost everything, he remembered. It was too late. I blocked every number he used. That evening, the doorbell rang, followed by frantic pounding. Through the peephole I saw him. David, but not David. His hair was a disheveled mess, his face unshaven, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained. His eyes were wild, sunken in sockets of despair. Lena, open the door. Open the damn door, you bitch. I know you're in there. I ignored him. I walked into the kitchen and calmly cooked myself a bowl of pasta, topping it with a perfectly fried golden egg. The steam curled up, fragrant and comforting. His screaming and pounding became the most pleasant dinner music I'd ever heard. I didn't know how long it went on before it finally ceased, replaced by an exhausted silence. I finished my meal, washed the bowl, and saw a new message on my phone. It was from Sarah. A photo. 2 uniformed officers were shoving a handcuffed David into the back of a police car. His face was contorted in a scream of pure rage and defeat. The caption read, "Clean catch. Charges filed." I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I saved it and set it as my phone's wallpaper. I wanted a daily reminder. This is the fate of a betrayer. And I knew with a cold certainty that this was only the beginning. The true satisfaction was still to come. The legal proceedings were a formality. As a key witness, I provided the authorities with the entire meticulously organized evidence file. The investigating officer, a seasoned detective, looked over the clear, logically airtight chain I presented, his face a mask of professional admiration. "Mrs. Croft," he remarked, "your counter-investigation skills and evidence preservation are better than some of our own. This is impressive." I offered a faint, weary smile. Necessity is a ruthless teacher. The case was airtight. Faced with the mountain of proof, David's denials crumbled into pathetic whimpers. In the detention center, through his court-appointed lawyer, he finally learned the full, humiliating truth. That the anonymous whistleblower, the architect of his ruin, was the wife he had shared a bed with for 7 years. That I had laid the trap step by meticulous step and he had walked right into it. He broke completely. Using his one phone call, he dialed my number. I picked up, saying nothing. His voice was a raw, hysterical screech through the receiver. "Lena. You vicious, cold-blooded monster. Even if I die, I'll never forgive you. How could you be so cruel? We had 7 years together. 7 years. You'll pay for this. You'll get what's coming to you." I listened quietly, letting him rage until he was spent, gasping and sobbing on the other end of the line. "David," I said, my voice even and devoid of all emotion. "Now you know what it feels like." I paused. "You think I didn't know about Chloe? About Jessica? About Danielle? You think I didn't know you were using our money to fund your affairs? You wanted my parents' apartment, David? You're not ruthless. You're just stupid. You overestimated your own cleverness and you underestimated a woman whose heart you broke completely. I hung up. I blocked the number. That man was erased from my world. With Sarah's expert guidance, the divorce was swift and brutal. The court, presented with overwhelming evidence of his infidelity, financial malfeasance, and fraud, awarded me 70% of our marital assets. The embezzled funds were reclaimed by his company. His personal assets were liquidated to cover fines. He was left with nothing but an orange jumpsuit and a 15-year sentence. His parents came to my door, wailing and threatening, trying to use guilt and family obligation as their weapons. I didn't argue. I invited them in, sat them down, and turned on the projector. The photo of David and Chloe. His credit card statements with other women's names. The secret contract with Evans. The bank transfers. The investment agreement he signed. The slideshow of his son's sin played out on the wall. Their anger turned to shock, then to shame, and finally to a humiliated silence. Mr. and Mrs. Croft, I said, switching off the projector. I didn't force him to do anything. I simply protected myself. Your son did this to himself. If you come here again, I won't hesitate to call the police. Or I can send these slides to every one of your friends and relatives. The choice is yours. They left with their heads down, defeated. I never heard from them again. Chloe, implicated in the financial mess for accepting gifts bought with stolen money, had her probation revoked. She was sent back to prison to serve her full term. The scandal was a media sensation for a week. But public opinion, to my surprise, sided with me. I was portrayed not as a vengeful shrew, but as a calm, intelligent, wronged woman who had fought back with precision and grace. I became a reluctant symbol for betrayed women everywhere. When the final divorce decree arrived, stamped with the court seal, I felt no joy, no sorrow. Only a quiet, profound, and settled relief. It was over. The first thing I did was sell the house that held so many ghosts. I bought a modern, airy loft with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with light. I filled it with my own art, my own books, my own choices. It was no longer our home. It was mine. My sanctuary. My fortress. I resigned from my job. I traveled to places David had never wanted to visit. I signed up for the painting classes I'd always postponed. I learned Italian. I met new people, interesting, vibrant people who had nothing to do with my old life. I was finally living for myself, and the woman I was becoming was someone I actually liked. I heard snippets about David through Sarah. He'd aged decades in prison, his spirit broken. Chloe, upon her release, was a hollowed-out shell, working a dead-end job, her vanity and arrogance utterly extinguished. They were ghosts. Their misery was not my triumph. My triumph was my own peace. My life had finally, truly begun again. The long, dark night was over. The dawn was mine. Of course. Here is the continuation of the story. The silence in my new loft was different. It wasn't the oppressive, lonely quiet of the house I'd shared with David, but a peaceful, earned stillness. For months I breathed it in. I traveled to a small coastal town in Italy, just as I'd promised myself. I ate pasta alone at a tiny trattoria, I swam in the sea at dawn, and I filled a sketchbook with bad drawings of crumbling buildings and good wine. The woman in those sketches was a stranger to me, softer around the edges, her eyes less guarded. I started my own small consulting business, leveraging the project management skills I'd honed over a decade. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Every success was mine alone. Every failure was a lesson I owned. I met Daniel, the architect, at a networking event. He was kind, with a quiet steadiness that felt like an anchor. He didn't try to dazzle me, he just listened. Our relationship was a slow, gentle burn, built on shared laughter over bad coffee and a mutual respect for each other's space. It was healthy. It was normal. It was everything I'd never had. I thought I had outrun the past. I thought I had boxed it up, labeled it, the David years, and stored it in some dark, forgotten corner of my mind. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday. I was working late in my loft, preparing a presentation for a new client. The city lights glittered beyond my windows, a galaxy of lives I knew nothing about. An email notification popped up in the corner of my screen. No subject line. The sender was a jumble of random letters and numbers. A prickle of unease, a ghost of a feeling traced its way down my spine. I clicked it open. There were no words. Just 3 photos. The first was of me and Daniel taken 2 days ago. We were leaving a movie theater laughing about something. The angle was from across the street telephoto lens. The second was of me entering my building's lobby, my face clear and unsuspecting. The third was a close-up of Daniel walking to his car, his briefcase in hand. Below the images, a single line of text, bolded and in blood-red font. He seems nice. It would be a shame if something happened to him. The ice-water dread I hadn't felt in over a year flooded back into my veins, instantaneous and paralyzing. My hands went numb on the keyboard. It wasn't the blatant threat that terrified me, it was the intimacy of it. They knew Daniel. They knew where I lived. They had been watching us. This wasn't a random act of harassment. It was a targeted, calculated message. My first primal instinct was to call Daniel, to scream at him to be careful, to lock his doors. But I forced myself to breathe. Lena. Don't react. Analyze. This wasn't David's style. He was rotting in a cell, his rage impotent and distant. This was colder, more professional. Mr. Evans? He'd been taken down in the sting, but his organization was a hydra. Cut off one head and another might grow back. Or maybe it was someone else entirely, a player from the periphery I'd never even known about. I forwarded the email to Sarah immediately. Her response was a phone call within 30 seconds. Lena. Breathe. Are you safe? Is he with you? I'm alone, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He's at his place. Hey. Listen to me. This changes nothing and everything. Your routine changes now. You vary your routes. You check your car. You are hyper-aware of your surroundings. But you do not show fear. You do not let them know they've gotten to you. They're threatening Daniel, Sarah, I said, the words tight in my throat. He didn't sign up for this. I can't drag him into my mess. It's a bit late for that, she said, her tone grimly practical. They've already dragged him in. Your only move is to tell him. Tonight. Full disclosure. He deserves to know what he's facing, and you need an ally, not a liability you're trying to protect. Telling Daniel was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I showed him the email in my well-lit, peaceful loft, the city sparkling innocently behind us. I watched the confusion on his face morph into concern, then into a hard, protective anger. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. Okay, he said after a long silence. He took my hand. His was warm and steady. Hey, so we have a problem. We'll deal with it. His use of the word we undid me. A single tear escaped and traced a hot path down my cheek. He wiped it away with his thumb. Lena, I'm not David. I don't run from problems. And I sure as hell don't let some anonymous coward threaten someone I care about. He pulled me into a hug. We're in this together. But the nightmare was just beginning. The next day Daniel called me, his voice strained. Those offers I told you about. For the community center plans? They're back. And they're not offers anymore. It's a threat. They mentioned you by name. They said it would be a pity if your new consulting business faced unforeseen regulatory hurdles. The pieces once again clicked into a terrifying picture. This wasn't just revenge for taking down Evans. This was business. They wanted Daniel's proprietary architectural designs, and they saw me, my past, my connection to him, as the perfect point of leverage. We were both targets caught in the same web. The peaceful new world I had built was an illusion. The shadow from my past was longer and darker than I'd ever imagined. It had been waiting, patient and silent, for me to let my guard down, for me to find something I cared about losing. The coldness I thought I'd retired settled over me again, a familiar, functional armor. The fear was still there, buzzing underneath, but it was being slowly smothered by a rising, furious resolve. They had made a critical mistake. They thought they were threatening a vulnerable woman. They didn't realize they were reawakening the one who had already destroyed a powerful man. They had given me a new purpose. I looked at Daniel, at the worry in his kind eyes, and I made a silent vow. I had built this life. This peace. This love. And I would burn their entire world to the ground before I let them take it from me. Of course. Here is the continuation. The cold resolve that washed over me was familiar, like slipping on a well-worn coat. The fear for Daniel, the violation of being watched. It all condensed into a single sharp point of purpose. They wanted to play in the shadows. I would bring the light. And I would make it blinding. We're not waiting for the next move, I said to Daniel, my voice low and steady. We're making it. Sarah came over, her face a mask of professional concern. The three of us, the betrayed wife, the architect, and the shark, huddled in my living room. A war council convened on a plush rug. We go to the police, Daniel said, his jaw tight. We have the email. We have the threats against my work. It's not enough, Sarah and I said in unison. She nodded at me to continue. It's circumstantial, I explained. An untraceable email and some aggressive business negotiations? They'll file a report, maybe put a patrol car on our street for a night. It won't stop them. It'll just make them more careful. We need proof. We need to know who we're dealing with, and we need to hand the authorities a case they can't ignore. A plan began to form in my mind, audacious and dangerous. It was a risk, a huge one. But it was the only play we had. We give them what they want, I said. They both stared at me. Think about it, I pressed. They believe I have something. They think I'm a loose end from David's mess, that I might have kept a backup of his data, something even more valuable than what the police recovered. So we let it leak. Through channels they'll trust. We make me the bait. Daniel immediately shook his head. Lena, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. We're not using you as live bait. It's the only way to draw them into the open, I argued. They're a ghost. We have to make them solid. I turned to Sarah. We don't do it without a safety net. We loop in Detective Miller. He handled David's case. He'll understand. This will be a controlled operation. It took 2 weeks to set the stage. Sarah, using her deep well of legal contacts, spread the word in the right seedy corners of the business underworld. Lena Croft is struggling. The divorce settlement wasn't as clean as she thought. She's bitter, she's broke, and she's sitting on a gold mine of her ex-husband's data. She's looking to make a deal to disappear. The bait was taken faster than we expected. A message arrived on an encrypted messaging app Sarah had set up on a burner phone. We hear you have a package for sale. My heart was a drum against my ribs as I typed back, following the script we'd prepared with Detective Miller. I might. The price is high. We have deep pockets. Prove you have it. I sent them a heavily redacted, encrypted screenshot of one of David's real files, a financial projection for Project Phoenix, that was useless on its own but looked legitimate. It was the digital equivalent of flashing a wad of cash. They bit. A meeting was set. A deserted industrial park on the outskirts of the city. Midnight. I was to come alone with the data drive. The night of the meeting, I dressed in dark, practical clothing. I placed a tiny high-resolution camera in a button on my jacket. A microtransmitter was sewn into the collar. Detective Miller and his team were already in position, hidden in unmarked vans among the decaying warehouses. Daniel kissed me, his face a canvas of fear and fierce pride. Please be careful, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. This ends tonight, I promised him, my voice calm. I felt a surreal sense of calm. This was just another project. The most important one of my life. I drove to the location, my hands steady on the wheel. The industrial park was a graveyard of rusted metal and shattered windows. The wind whistled through the skeletons of old machinery. I parked where instructed and got out holding the decoy drive. A cheap USB stick filled with corrupted code. 3 figures emerged from the shadows of a warehouse. The one in front was sleek, expensively dressed in a trench coat despite the chill. It wasn't Mr. Evans. This was someone new, someone younger with cold, dead eyes. A lieutenant sent to do the dirty work. Mrs. Croft, he said, his voice a flat monotone. A pleasure. Let's see the merchandise. I held up the drive. The money first. He nodded to one of his men who opened a sleek aluminum briefcase. It was packed with neatly bundled bills. The cliché of it was almost amusing. As the man stepped forward to take the drive, the lieutenant's lip curled. You know, he said, his dead eyes scanning me, your husband was a greedy fool. But he was a useful fool. Until you became a problem. I didn't flinch. He made his choices. I made mine. The man plugged the drive into a ruggedized tablet. His face contorted in confusion. Boss, it's garbage. Encrypted nonsense. The lieutenant's eyes snapped to me, full of cold venom. You stupid woman. You think you can play us? He lunged for me. But before his hands could touch me, a voice amplified by a bullhorn shattered the silence. Police. Freeze. Everyone on the ground. Now. Floodlights exploded to life, bathing the entire area in a harsh white glare. The lieutenant and his men froze, blinded. It was over in a chaotic, beautiful minute. Shouts, the scuffle of feet, the metallic click of handcuffs. The briefcase of cash was seized. As Detective Miller led the spitting mad lieutenant away, he nodded to me, a flicker of respect in his eyes. It was a brave thing you did, Mrs. Croft. We've been trying to get a hook into this crew for months. This might just be it. I stood there in the swirling red and blue lights, the adrenaline finally crashing over me, leaving me trembling. The shadow had a face. And it was in handcuffs. The sting operation was the beginning of the end. The lieutenant, facing a long list of charges, immediately started talking, trying to cut a deal. He gave up names, operations, and the location of the syndicate's new headquarters. It was a treasure trove. The subsequent police raids made the news for days. Major organized crime syndicate dismantled. The headlines blared. My name was kept out of it, a footnote as an anonymous tipster. The new information also sealed David's fate forever. His deeper, more integral role in the syndicate was laid bare. Not just an embezzler but a key facilitator. His sentence was extended by another 10 years. He would likely die in prison. I felt nothing when I heard. He was a ghost, a cautionary tale. As for Chloe, her brief taste of freedom was over. Her involvement in passing messages and acting as a courier for the syndicate was uncovered. Her probation was revoked permanently. She was sent back to prison, this time for a significantly longer term. The last of her vanity was extinguished, replaced by the grim reality of a life behind bars. The true closure, however, came on a quiet Sunday morning weeks later. Daniel and I were on the empty plot of land where our future house would stand. The sun was warm on our faces. The nightmare was over. Truly over. He turned to me, his expression serious. Lena, what you did, it was the bravest, most terrifying thing I've ever seen. And it made me realize something. He got down on one knee in the dirt. My heart stopped. He didn't have a ring. He held out a simple, old-fashioned key. I know you value your independence more than anything. And so do I. This is the key to my house. I want you to have it. Not as a promise to change your life, but as an invitation to share mine. Let's build this house, Lena. Let's build a life. Together. On our own terms. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were warm tears, not of sorrow or fear, but of a hope I'd thought was lost to me. This wasn't a transaction or a performance. It was a choice. A partnership. Yes, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I took the key. It felt solid. Let's build something. We built the house with a wall of windows facing the woods, drenching every room in light. My painting studio had north light. His office had a view of the oak tree we'd saved during construction. It was ours. Every board, every tile, every choice was a testament to the future, not an anchor to the past. I thought of David sometimes in his cell, of Chloe in hers. Their lives were defined by endings. Mine was defined by a beginning I had fought for, bled for, and won. The world was no longer a sleeping aquarium or a battlefield. It was just the world. And I was no longer just a survivor or an avenger. I was finally, simply, and completely alive. The end.